$14.99. That's what a lot of buffets charge for unlimited food, and on paper, that looks like the worst pricing decision in the entire restaurant industry. Let a stranger eat as much as they physically want for one flat price, and surely the hungriest customers walk out having cost the business money. That's the assumption almost everyone makes when they see the sign out front. And it's wrong, in a way that reveals one of the most quietly engineered business models in food service. Buffets aren't gambling on how much food a person can eat. They're running a business built around the fact that the human stomach, human psychology, and the physical layout of a steam table are all far more predictable than they look. The uncertainty that seems built into all you can eat has almost entirely been designed out of the equation before you ever pick up a plate. Start with what buffets actually spend on food, because this is the number that surprises people first. Most full-service restaurants run a food cost of around 30 to 35% of revenue, meaning for every dollar you spend, 30-some cents goes to ingredients. Buffets, despite the unlimited branding, target almost exactly the same range, sometimes even lower. That shouldn't be possible if people are truly eating without limit. But the food cost holds steady because of what's actually sitting under those heat lamps. Here's the part that changes how you look at the whole spread. Walk down a buffet line and notice the order: bread, salad, soup, rice, pasta, and only then the protein station. That's not random. It's an engineered sequence because the cheapest foods on the entire line, fried rice, mashed potatoes, dinner rolls, pasta and sauce, cost the restaurant somewhere between 20 and 40 cents per serving to produce, while a serving of crab legs, prime rib, or grilled shrimp can run anywhere from $3 to $6. Every plate that gets 50% full on rice and bread before a customer even reaches the protein station is a plate that protects the restaurant's margin, and the layout is built specifically to make that happen without anyone noticing they're being steered. And this is where the psychology gets genuinely clever, not manipulative in a hidden fee way, just structurally smart. The average adult stomach holds somewhere close to 1 liter comfortably before the brain starts sending strong fullness signals. Appetizers and starches expand in the stomach faster than dense protein, so a customer who fills up on soup and salad first simply has less physical room left for the expensive stuff by the time they reach it. Multiply that by every customer in the restaurant, every single day, and you get a food cost that behaves almost identically to a regular restaurant's, even though the pricing model looks completely different from the front door. Now let's talk about the protein station specifically, because it hides one of the most deliberate cost controls in the whole business. Notice how prime rib, turkey, or ham is almost never self-serve. There's a carver standing behind it, slicing by hand. That's not hospitality theater. It's portion control wearing an apron. A trained carver can be told, explicitly, to keep slices within a target weight range, something like 2 to 3 ounces per cut. A self-serve pan of the same protein would get scooped inconsistently, sometimes double or triple that amount per plate. Putting a person between the customer and the expensive food is one of the cheapest, most effective cost controls a buffet has, and it's been standing in plain sight the entire time. So here's the reframe worth sitting with. A buffet isn't really selling unlimited food. It's selling unlimited access to a menu that's been quietly weighted, so the math works out roughly the same as a restaurant with a printed price list. The flat fee just moves the perceived risk from the diner's wallet onto the restaurant's floor plan and food science, both of which they control completely. Let's move to the second engine of buffet profitability, because food cost is really only half the story. The other half is speed, specifically how fast a table turns over. A full-service restaurant typically holds a table for somewhere between 75 and 90 minutes once you account for ordering, waiting on food, eating, and paying. A buffet table, by contrast, often turns in 45 to 60 minutes because there's no menu to read, no wait for food to arrive, and no check to sit around for. Many buffets charge at the register on the way in, not the way out. That difference sounds small until you multiply it across a whole dining room on a busy Saturday. If a restaurant can seat a table 2 times in the span it would normally seat at once, that's essentially doubling the revenue potential of the exact same square footage without adding a single chair. And this is where labor costs enter the picture, because buffets structure staffing completely differently from a normal restaurant, and it's not subtle once you see it. A full-service restaurant might run 1 server per 3 or 4 tables, taking orders, running food, checking back, refilling drinks, closing checks. A buffet can run 1 server per 8, 10, sometimes 12 tables, because that server's job shrinks down to drink refills, plate clearing, and the occasional greeting. Labor typically runs 25 to 35% of revenue in full-service dining. Buffets often push that down closer to 18 to 22% because the self-service model quietly does a huge chunk of the work customers don't realize they're doing for free. You're bussing your own first trip to the line, refilling your own plate, managing your own pacing, all labor that used to belong to a paid employee. Now here's a detail that almost never comes up outside the industry, and it's worth explaining clearly because it explains a lot of buffet behavior you've probably seen without understanding why. Health codes in most states require hot-held food to be discarded after a set window, often somewhere around 2 hours on the steam line, or moved and reheated under strict temperature rules. That means buffets aren't just planning for what customers eat, they're planning for a fixed, predictable amount of waste built directly into food safety law. Kitchens use pan-fill logs and timed rotation schedules specifically to minimize how much gets thrown out at the 2-hour mark, refilling smaller batches more often instead of loading a full tray and hoping it clears in time. Waste isn't an accident at a buffet. It's a cost that's forecasted, tracked, and priced into the plate before you ever walk in the door. Let's talk about drinks for a moment, because this is where a huge amount of quiet margin lives, and it rarely gets mentioned when people talk about buffet economics. Fountain soda has a food cost of just a few cents per serving against a price of $2 to $3 a glass. Margins north of 90% are completely normal. A lot of buffets either charge separately for drinks or bundle a beverage package onto the flat food price. And either way, that's one of the highest margin categories in the entire restaurant. Alcohol works even harder in this direction. Plenty of buffet-style restaurants, especially the casino and cruise-adjacent ones, keep food pricing nearly flat while running a full bar on the side, because a $5 glass of wine that costs them under $1 to pour does more for the bottom line than an extra scoop of prime rib ever could. Here's where the model gets genuinely strange, and it's worth slowing down for, because it explains why buffet pricing can look so different from one location to another, even when the food looks nearly identical. Casino buffets are a completely different animal from a standalone family buffet on the highway. In a casino, the food doesn't need to turn a profit on its own at all. It can operate as what's called a loss leader, priced low or even sold near break-even, because the real profit center is the gaming floor a few dozen feet away. A $12 prime rib buffet inside a casino can lose money on paper and still be one of the smartest financial decisions the property makes, because every customer who sits down to eat walks past the wall of slot machines to get there and back. That's genuinely one place where the unlimited food should be losing money instinct is closer to true. It's just that the loss is intentional, and it's being paid for by a completely different part of the business. Which brings up a fair point worth naming directly. This cost engineering model doesn't apply evenly across every buffet you've ever walked into. Small, independently owned buffets, the kind run by a single family without a corporate supply chain behind them, often operate on thinner margins than the big chains, because they don't have the purchasing scale to get fried rice ingredients or bulk chicken thighs at the same rock-bottom price per pound that a 200-location chain negotiates. Some of those smaller operators genuinely are closer to break-even on food than people assume, especially the ones known for generous seafood or steak selections that skip the layout tricks and let the protein sit right up front. The math in this video describes the dominant model, not a universal law, but it explains why that dominant model exists and why it keeps winning. Now let's connect the pricing tiers, because this is another lever that quietly does a lot of work. Notice how buffets almost always charge differently by age and by time of day. A lunch price, a higher dinner price, a discounted price for seniors, and even lower price for kids under a certain height marker measured right at the host stand. That's not generosity. It's demand-based pricing dressed up as a family-friendly policy. Lunch buffets are priced lower because the kitchen is already prepped and running regardless. Filling seats during a slower part of the day, even at a reduced margin per person, beats an empty dining room. Dinner carries the higher margin proteins and the higher price to match, time for when demand and appetite are both at their peak. Kids' pricing works because children genuinely eat a fraction of what an adult plate holds, but families rarely calculate that gap in real time. They see kids eat free, or kids eat for $5, and register it as a deal, not as a company correctly predicting that a 7-year-old isn't going to make 3 trips to the prime rib station. There's also a supply chain piece worth understanding, because it's part of why the cheap food strategy works as well as it does at scale. Large buffet chains buy in volumes that let them negotiate protein and produce costs that a regular restaurant simply can't match. We're talking about ingredients purchased by the truckload on standing contracts, locked in months ahead of time, which smooths out price spikes that would otherwise wreck a flat price model. If chicken prices spike for 6 weeks, a menu restaurant can adjust prices item by item. A buffet can't reprice the sign out front every week without confusing and losing customers, so the whole system depends on locking in ingredient costs ahead of time and leaning harder on the cheap filler categories, starches, breads, sauces, to absorb any volatility on the protein side. That single structural difference is part of why buffet menus lean so heavily on pasta, rice, and bread across almost every chain you've ever walked into, regardless of cuisine. So if you zoom all the way out, here's the full shape of it. The flat price at the door isn't a bet against how much you can eat. It's the visible tip of a system that controls the invisible 90%, a plate layout engineered to fill you up cheap before you reach anything expensive, a carving station that measures portions by hand, a table turnover speed nearly double a normal restaurant, a staffing model that quietly outsources labor back to the customer, waste built into food safety timing and priced in ahead of time, and drink margins doing more financial heavy lifting than most people would ever guess. None of it requires anyone to trick you at the register. The system was just built, piece by piece, so that the math holds up no matter how hungry the room gets. Next time you're standing at a buffet line deciding whether to load up on rolls first or head straight for the crab legs, you're not just making a food choice, you're stepping into a layout that was tested and tuned long before you walked in. If breaking down the real mechanics behind places like this is the kind of thing you find genuinely interesting, subscribe so the next one lands in your feed, and if this changed how you'll walk that buffet line next time, tap like before you go.